Chief Energy Officer from New Energy Nexus. Here
Hello,
we
Ravi.
are, Instagram Live with Atmos Financial and New
Yeah,
Energy. Yeah,
excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah. So as I mentioned, this is a new series that we've started, and we want to get the word out about what the amazing things that our nonprofits are doing. And you and I, we've known each other for years now, and I've been a supporter of New Energy Nexus, and you've been a supporter of me and getting my work out. And now very excited to, well, New Energy Nexus was one of the first nonprofits that we brought onto the Atmos platform for people to
Yeah,
do, which is really exciting, for me to be able to give back and support further to the mission, since it's so core to what I do and what you do. So yeah, would love to hear a little bit about the formation of New Energy Nexus. What is it that you do? And yeah, what is the mission of New Energy Nexus?
sure. So thanks again for having me and us at New Energy Nexus, Ravi, and wonderful to be with Atmos. We are a nonprofit whose mission is to support folk like you, diverse entrepreneurs who are driving innovation and building equity into the global clean energy economy. We're sort of assuming the energy transition's afoot. Our theory of change is that we've got to accelerate it for obvious reasons: decarbonization, peace, and justice. Best way to do that is to enable entrepreneurs like your good self that have a bigger purpose than just making money in most cases, and not, just talking about unicorns, but talking about banks that neobank and do better with their consumers' money, or about women selling solar home systems in villages in Uganda to provide light at night without, the perils of kerosene, and also, of course, having a carbon benefit in those communities and a cost savings effect. So we have an incredible team of 120 humans around the world in about 12 places now. Grew up in California, but have gone global. And we support hundreds of companies. I think 610 at the end of the third quarter of this year was our number. So we're feeling pretty good about this year, in different ways. Thousands of entrepreneurs go through training programs, receive funds from us, grants, debt, equity, different kinds in different places. And we basically back them to bring us all out of this into a better, a more abundant, clean energy future.
Yeah, amazing. And not just here in California, but down the street from both of our homes. So here in Oakland, started from an office, and now a global, not just a global focus, but globally, global locations. So in what,
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 countries now with physical locations.
We have teams in a dozen countries. Well, several of those are our own entities, like subsidiaries of the nonprofit in California, 7 or 8, and then 3 or 4 partners, like here in Australia, where I'm speaking to you from. We've partnered with an organization called Energy Lab that has a wonderful incubator. If any of you or your listeners or your entrepreneurs are ever in Sydney, they've got the best co-working space I've seen amongst many for entrepreneurs in clean energy, and we work with them on trying to decarbonize and optimize the mineral production, refining, and processing that Australia is like an 800-pound gorilla in, so that we make better batteries, which is going to be a big part of the energy transition.
Huge, and some amazing work that's been done down there.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, Australia got to 50% renewable electricity supply in their grid, because they've long been a sort of postcard from the future for adoption of rooftop solar in particular. Over 34% of the electricity that day was coming off the roof, more than the coal generating plants of Australia, which, if you know anything about Australia's electricity, just a decade ago, the Prime Minister was bringing coal into the Parliament and saying, coal is king forever and a day, and it's declining precipitously. And, by the end of the decade, they now project it'll probably be largely gone here in Australia. So
Yeah,
change can come.
not just a decade ago, like just before the last election. So it was,
Yeah.
his prime minister was quite pro coal. But it's good to see the positive change that's happened in that election, and in this U.S. election that we just had 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So very positive change afoot. globally on that in Brazil as well. So that's major markets are you care about creating and having a habitable life. So for all of us, so on your mission to support global entrepreneurs, is there any entrepreneurs, and is there a set amount? Do you want a certain goal of number of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, we at New Energy Nexus are trying to be entrepreneurial ourselves and build our systems to support. So these training programs, accelerators and incubators, hackathons, boot camps, different names go for different kinds of curricula for different companies and at different stages and places and markets. We try to hone those and continuously improve those, and we have our own objectives and key results annually. So, our big number is the number of startups we support meaningfully and the number of entrepreneurs that get trained and otherwise supported by us. And that support could look like mentoring provision or matchmaking with a partner or an off-taker for their business. It might be money, as I mentioned. We don't get to give or invest money in all of the companies that go through our programs, but many, probably 200-300 will receive some sort of funds or by our introduction this year. So those range from things like CalSeed, which you might know in the Californian market, or the Clean Fight in New York. Those are quite well-established programs funded by the California Energy Commission in the first case, and by the New York State Energy Research and Development Agency in the other. Those are multi-month programs with lots of activities and offerings for the entrepreneurs. In CalSeed, we put $150,000 grant money into the company. And then if they go through to the sort of what we call the prototype award after their concept is sort of proven, they get another $450,000. So it can be really meaningful support. This is that money at least is non-dilutive. So best kind of money you can get, as as an entrepreneur. And it just ranges in Uganda, where we support dozens of companies annually, growing to hundreds. The microfinancing we do there is very small ticket size, but very meaningful. I think our entire loan book is $50,000 or something in that order, and yet it has impacted tens of thousands of lives. We consignment finance products for these entrepreneurs to sell, and then they pay us back over time. And it's amazing what we're doing there in terms of displacing kerosene lamps and dirty fuel for stoves and so forth. So really powerful. One last example, not to do too much of the potted tour of the world, but I know your listeners and viewers might get tired of this, but we work a lot in Southeast Asia, which is sort of a region of the world that we don't often talk enough about in the climate context. There's just 700 million people between sort of Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And we've set up programs in Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Indonesia being the big dog, 300 million humans, same sort of population as the United States, and have about 18 staff there running programs. And we've put about 70 companies through a fairly, strong accelerator program over the last 3-4 years. That we've also had a sort of sidecar fund, the more conventional US model, like we did at Powerhouse, with a fund to follow on with the companies going through the programs. And 7 of those we've invested in through our venture capital fund called Nexus Indonesia One Fund. It's just a small thing, but it's the first early stage equity in Indonesia. I swear, Ravi, it's ridiculous. This enormous country, and there was like not a single energy angel group or investment vehicle for that market until we got there and were able to stand that up with the help of a philanthropic donation, actually. So we took a grant and turn that into equity investing so that we can repurpose it as it comes back. And we've already had exits from those 7 investments. We've had one, and have some, real valuation pops, because it's going to go. And there's a whole lot of co-investment and follow-on funding as well. So it's a very successful formula. We know what we do to support startups. It's very much modeled on the Californian experience, but we're now taking it global so that we can accelerate the energy transition everywhere.
That's amazing. And it speaks to a phrase that I first heard you say probably 5 or 7 years ago, and I repeat often, as we can't have 100% clean energy unless 100% of the people have clean energy. And I use that in the context here in the United States of giving access to lower income, like homeowners who and individuals who have lower income or lower credit scores, and who have so far been um, uh, excluded from putting solar on their roof or getting an electric vehicle or something like that. Because that's part of our mission, is that as a banking entity, what we want to do is serve everyone, and through our bank deposits, fund these projects with lower cost capital and more accessible and inclusive capital. But you're sort of, again, as you're acting upon a global stage, you're reaching, well, don't know if you're there yet, but you are working towards reaching those 1 to 2 billion people who do not have regular or any electricity access, and whose countries are saying, what type of energy generation are we going to build? And those countries and those entities are saying, hey, check out this nice dirty black coal, and here's some oil for you. And it's like, how do we get them to leapfrog that and go with the modern, don't put in landlines, go with cellular, go with mobile phones, don't do the fossil fuels, jump ahead and get into renewables, battery storage.
Yeah, that's 100% right. And how do we get them to, as we work with them in common cause to bring them the best and cheapest technologies, which happen to be the solar, the wind, the storage, the electric mobility solutions. And so, and how do we do that? We start up startups. Entrepreneurs are the way to spread in these countries these products and services. India well. We work with state-owned discoms, they're called the distribution companies, which, like you say, they're sort of trapped in this uneconomic coal market, which just doesn't work. It's got overcapacity, and yet, millions of Indians still don't even get electricity, or it's unreliable and too expensive. We bring startups into those discoms, the state-owned enterprises, to improve their grid edge systems, to make them more efficient, to give them renewables and storage and these capacities that they haven't built domestically. And by introducing those startups, they start contracting with them. The startups grow, they get better, smarter, and modernize their grid to the way we want to be. And it's sort of this win-win scenario. That's very much part of our shtick, and it is this 100% for the 100% vision that's going to get us going. I mean, back to your point about the US, it's the same there. I believe the reason Biden didn't see as big a backlash is because people are feeling touched by the industrial strategy that Biden's unleashed in the first 2 years of his administration. The battery belt is growing across the Midwest. The clean energy investments are employing people in red states through wind and whatever. And that means people are buying into it, and it's defanging the culture wars around renewables versus fossils and all that nonsense that the Republicans want to throw at it. So some of the most important work we do in the States is around this justice and equity agenda, where we have worked, for example, with indigenous communities like the Navajo to build companies to try to take advantage of the energy transition to uplift that nation that was screwed for so long, for decades, by the fossil fuel industry on their territory. We're working in Southern California with tribes around the lithium opportunity that is in Southern California to produce a sort of low carbon lithium supply from the geothermal resource there and turn it into batteries for the energy transition in America. But to buy in the local folk rather than extract from them and exclude them from the benefits. The difference in the clean energy future is that we're not going to do the same extractive economics as the dirty energy. The opportunity is for this distributed electricity system to also have decentralized ownership and democratized control. It's a pretty, exciting prospect.
Yeah, definitely. And those of us who've been in this fight for a while definitely have that mindset, but there are those who've come from, who have brought their extractive mindset into this transition, which we need to push back against, so that we aren't tarnished by the same brush that they use within the fossil industry.
It's true.
And on that, I'd love to hear like how you've seen banking interact with the work that you do. So it's very clear it's like the biggest. So half of all deposits in the U.S. are housed with the top 5 banks in the U.S. So they have 50% of all of our deposits. That means a lot of the people in clean energy, climate work, bank with those banks, and their money is funding fossil fuel extraction. So we know that part of it. But how bank funding, like how is project capital, the startups that you how do they capitalize their project and fund their project, and what they further?
Sorry, my internet cracked up a little bit there, but it's about how our projects get, or how our companies' projects get financed, and how do we relate to the banks?
Exactly. It's like we know that we know that the big banks fund fossil fuels, and they're trying to work against. But in terms of funding the projects of your startups, how can bank capital support can support those?
Yeah. Look, it's a bit of a depends, of course, because it's wide and different in different markets. But first thing I'll say is, debt, for better or for worse, is the system we have for bringing the future forward. That's what we do in the world to pay for things we know we're going to need, whether it's the road down the middle of the town, or the sewer upgrade, or the energy infrastructure, and whether it's public or private debt. It's what we do, and I know that's a kind of almost controversial thing to say to some, but where the banks come in is providing some of that through private project finance for the programs that our startups want to do. And again, generally, I would say that, they're getting into this game. I mean, notwithstanding that they're also still funding the bad stuff, and that's often subsidized by public money, and ridiculous to say that we're still doing that in 2022. But, this year, I think, is the first year that the CapEx going into oil and gas will be less than the CapEx going into renewables. It's a pretty amazing threshold. We're not just like seeing more electricity flow, like the flow, but we're seeing the stock being financed more for clean than dirty in the first time in history. So, the banks are getting onto the right side of history, kicking and screaming, no doubt, because they make money doing the bad stuff and doing what they did. But got to, recognize a good trend when you see one and try to ride it. The question you're asking is, how do our startups leverage that, literally, like leverage it in the sense of finance on top of it? And again, it's sort of different in different places. We've been involved in interesting projects. Again, in India, we had a good one where the commercial and industrial rooftop sector really wasn't working in a lot of second-tier cities, because people didn't know how to lend against these small shops and warehouses and various buildings that they wanted to put CNI solar on. But in order to underwrite it, they couldn't work out who the owners were and who had liens on the building and all those sorts of questions. So we took a small grant of $5 million from a foundation and turned it around as debt to finance at low cost, 1 or 2% loans, this sector for a while, so as to sort of price the market, basically, and work out what the default risks were in doing projects of that sort in these second-tier cities. And what transpired was the default risks were low, and that people liked the fact that they saved money on electricity bills from going solar, and all the phenomena that we've seen in America and elsewhere with solar as it spreads. And so lo and behold, local debt, which in India is everything because you don't have a lot of international finance flowing into the country, started to form around that market and started to provide competitive loans and to get into that business and grow it. And, we think that was a really catalytic example of working with a non-bank finance company, in our case, in Delhi, to catalyze that project. But, we've done similar things in the States and elsewhere as well. So it's obviously, when you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of companies, there's lots of different stories I could bore you with. But the big point is, I feel like the funds are flowing. It's constipated and still there's too much going the wrong way. But the tide of history is on our side.
Definitely. And we're seeing the same thing here in the US, that we're moving deposits, and we actually work a lot of small banks in providing deposits and getting them, showing them that it can be profitable to lend for solar and for EVs, and sort of helping them make that transition themselves. So even as these other markets, the overall economy are sort of stalling out, we're helping them to continue to grow their balance sheet by switching over and start lending for residential solar. And so even some of our deposit customers are now going solar because these bank partnerships we're building. So it's pretty exciting, for
No, I think what you're doing, as an activist bank in the mix is a really remarkable contribution, and offering people those opportunities is great.
Yeah, thank you. And it's, one thing we like to call it no sacrifice banking. So it's like we pay up to 2% yield on savings. We give up to 5% cash back on mission aligned cashback purchases. So EV charging instead of gas purchases, CSA instead, and local stores instead of big box ones. Got over companies there. And then we give web and mobile apps. They're beautiful to use, easy to sign up, apply. And then all of your money funds clean energy. It's like there is no sacrifice. You don't get no yield. You have to pay a monthly fee to have the impact that you want. And it's not just do no harm. A lot of bigger banks are like, hey, we're fossil free. And it's like, well, 99% of the banks can say that because they define fossil free as we just don't fund the big, pipelines and the coal mines that the big banks are doing, but we're still funding auto loans for SUVs so you can buy your grocery down the street. Or we're still funding the McMentions with your natural gas or your fuel oil. It's like, hey, that's still fossil fuels. That's still contributing to the problem. So I want people to say, hey, my money is 100% climate positive. We're only funding the climate transition. And so we can do that because we are not a regulated entity. We are, as you said, an activist, neobank. So it's fun work doing what we're doing, and it
absolutely
and
impressive.
Thank you. And so in our support of your work, so what are like the new initiatives going on that you have, or something else that we haven't yet talked about that you want to highlight?
Yeah, look, the big goal for us is to get to 25 nodes in our Nexus. We consider ourselves sort of a networked organization globally, have two big bookends in the US of A with New York and California programs growing. We've recently been anointed to run an Empire Technology Prize in New York State, which is really exciting next year around decarbonizing the skyscrapers of Manhattan and beyond. But we're in 12 places today is my point, and we want to be in 25 by 2025. We want to grow this network of organizations that are supporting diverse entrepreneurs around the world, and increase the synergies between them. There's sort of this magic that happens. I mean, you and I experienced it in the co-working space years ago by bumping into good people and collaborating on different things. It's why we get to do this today. We want that to be a global phenomenon because it helps speed up the transition. Like if entrepreneurs in Lagos, Nigeria can meet folk in Goa, India that are sort of struggling with the same diesel displacement issues and need finance models or, some business innovation, they can borrow one from the other. And the nodes in the Nexus is sort of our magic, the network effect, the kind of way it works, that the value of the network is the square of the nodes. So yeah, we're trying to grow to that number of places and also markets that matter. It's not just a geographic thing. We do a lot on batteries because we think it's a linchpin technology. We want to do more on fintech and financial innovation, things like what you're doing, Ravi, with Atmos. So my pitch to you folk is to get behind sort of our organizational mission. This goal we have is 100,000 startups we want to support this decade. It's quite ambitious when we're only in the sort of 1,000 range today. So we're on our own exponential. The first waypoint to get there for us is to do more markets that matter and build programs and staff up so we can serve more startups in more places. And that ramp we call 25 by 25, and would love to get any supporters behind. We're a non-profit in the US. Donations are welcome at our website and wherever, and you guys have been great in introducing us to folks, so thank you for that and backing our brave goal.
Yeah, I mean, you can't you can't reach an ambitious goal unless you set one, and even if you fall short, it's like I say, you shoot for the moon, you still reach the stars. So
yeah,
so that's incredible. 100,000 startups in a decade. You're in the thousands. 7 years left. You get 7 doublings. You're over. From 1,000 and 7 doublings, you're over 100. So so
that's it.
that would do it. And so part of that is reaching those other Nexus, those other nodes. So to go from 12 to 25 in the next 3 years, what do you need? How do we get there?
Yeah. So, resourcing in terms of money is huge, and regular supporters that don't require sort of specific program outcomes. We get a lot of grants and we have contracts with governments and corporates to deliver a particular innovation agenda around lithium processing. Sure, that's what we're doing here in Australia as a startup cluster around, the refining step of rocks into lithium powder. But what we need is a more general support. So that's the big thing. But also, introductions are really valuable. Folk on this call might know someone in, Brazil that's got, an incubator or an entrepreneurial ecosystem, or a neo bank, that you might partner with in Canada might be kind of like supporting a cluster of startups or something or other. And we just want to build the network. And so those introductions are really valuable as well. And then, of course, we're always looking for great entrepreneurs. And I know a lot of them would be your customers because they give a shit and want to have no sacrifice banking. So, if there's startups out there listening to this, look at our web, and our Slack is a really rich community for being introduced to competitions and opportunities and deadlines for applications to accelerators and various programs. We tend to be very supportive of everyone's work in the space. So our newsletter is probably the go-to resource for just learning about what's out there on offer for startups. So, the last thing I'd ask is, if you're an entrepreneur, get in touch, get on the Slack, get involved in New Energy Network, we call it, on Slack. And there's 5,000 people like you working out how to drive change and do this thing quicker.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, the New Energy Nexus and the network is pretty amazing. And also what's really cool, and you and I have both been in the space similar amount of time. I think you a little bit longer than me, since you're a little bit older than me too.
Just a bit.
Yeah, it's that we are seeing exponential growth in the space overall, really in the last 5 years. 2017, 2018, really started to see things pick up. Like the aughts, there's few of us and scattered around, and definitely within the US, I mean, but I think also globally, with the and so the global movement, are you seeing sort of similar trends of exponential growth within these markets within each of your nodes so far, or is it still sort of at we're still at the flatter part of that curve and not yet hit the launch pad?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great awareness you have, because most humans can't see in the S curve. They see in a linear fashion. So, they expect it to just go up steadily rather than, like you said, through that heel of the turn upwards. And I would say I see, the inflection point in most markets this decade. It really is coming together. I mean, it's obviously different in different places. Like Indonesia is probably the most dramatic. We went there and sort of looked around the scene and met with folk. I'd worked there in the 20th century and had some contacts, and we found, not a single entrepreneur support organization in sight. And again, it's for a country of the size of the US doing energy programming. There were other incubators in industry and agriculture and other things. So we talked to them. We ended up partnering actually with Google on a sort of software thing, because there are a bunch of, social media apps and stuff being built in Jakarta. And we ran our first accelerator in their space and with their support. We've since seen that community just explode. The electric mobility market in Indonesia is going off. Like, there's dozens of companies retrofitting scooters and, fishing boats with electric motors. And, there's hot swappable battery formats competing to become the protocol on the streets of Java. And, it's just like 5 years later, you just see, boom, this is going to happen. I mean, solar less so, because they got a dominant monopoly utility that tries to shut down the market, but that too shall pass, because you just can't beat the overwhelming numbers ultimately. And yeah, I think that S curve of adoption in the decarbonization technologies addressing transport, the electricity grid, buildings, industry, all of it, they're certainly coming up from that low base you and I lived with in the noughts, as you said, and now this is the decade of doing. Implementation is on us, and it requires lots of startups. I mean, we say 100,000 startups. It sounds like a big number. It's really not. To do $3 trillion worth of work per annum, which is what, the big end of town claims we have to do, and we're doing less than $1 trillion today. You need $10 million businesses.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of small and medium enterprises, and they're going to come from somewhere. And some of them are going to be $100 billion businesses, but most of them are going to be $1 and $5 million businesses or less.
It's the long term. Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the deployment, for sure.
$4 to $6 trillion globally, because you look at those numbers, like the 3 trillion, like that original IPCC report. And they were saying it's like we would need to spend that, it's like the $2 to $4 trillion starting in 2016. So it was actually the report came out in late 2018, but they say we needed to start doing this 2 years ago. And I was like, wait,
right.
So not only do we need to 10x the amount of money we're spending, we need to invent time travel so we can go back and do this as well. So it's like we need more money, because it's like we're still, like you said, at just below, or like maybe we crossed $1 trillion this year, as we might have, but we're still a far cry short of where we need to be, and we're now many years past when we're supposed to start. So it's like we need to spend more money faster. So 100,000 startups, 1 million startups, 10 million, and they don't all have to be tech startups. It's going to be
electricians doing solar sales, and it's going to be mechanics doing electro retrofits.
It's going to be a 6-person roofing company that starts doing solar, and it's your normal plumbing company that's going to do heat pump hot water heaters. So
right.
We're all gonna play our part. And like the U.S. solar, everybody knows Tesla, Sunrun, SunPower, the big ones, but combined they're only like 20-25%. It's those 3, 6, 20-person companies that do work, that's doing the work, and we got to support them.
100%. So yeah, we think we're just making our little piece of it, but it's conversations like this and work like yours to raise up nonprofits, as you do with your program, that can turn the 1% that turns on 9% of people that follow you and get involved and bank with you and follow this and listen to this and get involved with us, and then those 9% plus the 1% that are doing it first will move the next 90. Sort of the 100 monkey program we're on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely describes the two of us. So I'm not to insult anyone else.
Indeed.
Well, yeah, we talked for a good amount of time so far. Is there any any last things you want to say or requests or?
No, look, other than, thank you and thanks to the audience and your members or whatever you call your customers. I feel like they're part of a movement, and that's a really meaningful thing, more than just customers. And although that's important too, and I'm sure they get good customer service. And, I appreciate that your business is one with a social mission that also supports other nonprofits and sees itself as part of a cooperative whole. And as do we, we're a, champion of the sort of model that it's the collaboration of humankind, not the competition of, actors that's going to get us there. And want to just keep doing things like this. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And thanks for, continuing to do what you do globally, because like you said, we need 100% for the 100%. Otherwise, we're not going to hit it. We can't just focus on, the 1% of the wealthiest 1%. So, we're going to keep at it.
Right.
I know you're going to keep going. We're definitely not going to stop. So thanks everybody for watching. And there'll be links in our bio, New Energy Nexus. Check us out. Check them out. If you join Atmos through their landing page, we will make a donation directly to New Energy Nexus. And then if you donate to them on a monthly basis, we will increase your yield on your savings to, it's currently at 2%. As of today, it will change. This is a very dynamic market we're in terms of interest rates. So check back as we make changes. And as always, 100% of your money will go and fund these clean energy projects that Danny was talking about. So we reach that goal. Danny, thanks. Awesome. And when you come back to the States, hit me up. It'd be great for go for a walk and
will do.
Coffee.
Great. Yeah, shall do. Thank you very much for this. Bye, y'all.